So I wanted to show off a game that I made in this new game engine made by the same person who made CTJS. It's called Whimtale, and it's a storytelling game engine, very much inspired by Bitsy. It is fully graphical, so you don't need to learn a programming language to pick it up. It's very easy to make objects and sounds and rooms. And the whole idea of it is to be able to make stories using a character that you can control. So naturally, as I was messing with this, I would thought to myself, well, what if the main character isn't the focus of the story? And the whole point is to control someone else, which very much goes against the idea of using an engine like this, but I was really curious to see how flexible the engine was, and so I came up with the idea with this game. And I'm going to showcase it first, and then explain sort of the inner workings behind what I did here. So you are actually controlling a mouse that's in the bottom left of the screen, and these are 8 actions you can do to control the fox, which is on the top half of the screen. So I can use these movement keys to movement actions to control the fox, and then each of these 4 icons represent a different action that will do a different attack around the fox. So we have one that attacks right in front, to the sides, the tail swipe hits behind, and then there's a bite that hits like diagonally in front. And so it's a turn-based game, so every action you do will result in an action made by enemies, and you have to kind of clear through this forest to get to the end. And that's the whole game. And I made 3 different enemies. So one of them moves every turn. These skulls move every other turn towards you. And then the bats move every turn in a random direction. And then the pumpkins in the previous level move every turn towards the fox. So this is the hero. You can only have 1 of these per game. And then here's all my levels. And you have to place only 1 of the hero in one of these levels, and that indicates the start of the game. And here's all the levels that I made. And each of these arrows causes a transition to the next stage. And then the final one, you have to get this apple at the end. So how did I do this? Well, it's all in the actors. The actors is where all of the logic happens. The hero itself can't have any scenarios tied to it because you're already directly controlling it. But the fox here has a lot of logic in it that allows it to move the way it does. So it's kind of crazy what I did here. But the basic idea of this engine is everything starts with events. So these special green blocks that you place down that are also right here, everything starts with events. So you cannot actually perform any logic in the game without having an initial event being attached to a chain. And these signals, they go left to right, as you can see here. And then any like extra logic, like conditionals, tend to go bottom to top. So for example, there's this signal called update HP, where I'm checking if here, as long as the HP is above 0, it's going to say a little message, fox saying ouch. That's because the fox isn't knocked out yet. So signals is kind of what carries the whole logic behind this, and there are a lot of them, so many that I made a whole other object listing all of the signals that I would need to make a game like this work, because otherwise I would just forget them or like maybe mistype them. So I'll start with the fox. So when the mouse moves over one of these arrows, these are the arrows from the bottom left of the stage here. And all they do is just send a signal. And then the signal is going to trigger other logic to happen. And then it's the same thing with these actions. I have action swipe, side swipe, bite, and tail. So if I go to the fox back here, here's the fox responding to those movement signals. It's going to move up, right, down, or left. I'll come back to that in a moment. This is the update HP. So if an enemy touches the fox, it's going to send an update HP signal, which triggers the fox is on signal for update HP here, and then what causes it to say ouch if it gets hurt. I didn't showcase that. And then it's really cool because you have notes here, and when you scroll out and have a lot of logic here, you can kind of group similar logic into different parts of the map here to know, like, at a high level where each thing um, lands. So, oh, ensure the fox's position is saved on stage start. This is what happens when a new room is entered. It stores the fox's location into variables to be read from later here. Does the same thing here. Every time you move, update the position. Flavor text for each attack. Each attack causes that a signal to happen. So here's just flavor text every time you use a move. And then there's two extra special signals here. A result of moving the fox, which happens here. Whenever a movement happens, there's going to be another generic signal that is triggered called move fox. And then there's a special other move called action post attack. So you can do two things as the mouse. You can make the fox move, or you can make the fox attack something. So this covers both of those cases. No matter what, any action you do, movement or non-movement, is going to trigger a post move fox update, which is what I make the enemies use to update their logic. So I'm gonna actually start with this actor. This actor doesn't show in the game, but it's a template that I can use to clone from. And all the other actors here, the enemy ones, they kind of have this very similar logic. So I'm gonna go through this one first, and then all I have to do when I showcase these three is their movement specific logic. Otherwise, they all do the same thing here. This whole area here is the enemy responding to the 4 different attacks the fox makes. So, like, here's the action swipe where the fox hits in front of them. And so here's where I'm reading the X and Y locations of the fox. And then I'm doing some math to try and figure out, oh, this is, if the fox moved one space to the right here, it would be on top of the enemy's location. And then I do a check if those are equal, because then that means that the fox landed a hit, and then the enemy should destroy themselves. So I do a very similar thing with all these other actions here. Action tail swipe involves 3 different tiles behind the fox. So that's these 3 different whole blocks of branches that are happening. There's a side swipe that involves 2 tiles, and there's a bite that involves 2 tiles. So that's what all this down here is. Here's as the result of the fox being moved, or after the move. So there was a thing I needed to do where I had to have a fox move and then have a post fox move afterward, because there's 2 situations in which a fox can run into an enemy and get hurt. Either the fox moves first and then runs into an enemy, or the fox moves, then the enemies move into the fox, and that triggers. I wanted that to trigger collision also. So I needed like a move and a post move event. And so that's why I have this here, where I'm comparing the enemy's location to the fox's as is, and then here's where I'm updating the HP to lower by 1, and then send a signal that the HP got updated. And then here is where I can start talking about the movement specific code. I kind of cut that off here in the template. So the movement logic for the pumpkin is all here, and all it does is every action that happens, it tries to move itself vertically every turn, and it does this by, again, comparing its location with the fox's. So it tries to move up and down to match the Y position. And if it is equal, then these 2 branches will say no, so then it wraps all the way over here, and then it compares the X positions of itself with the fox, and then it'll move right or left accordingly to try and get on top of the fox. So the skull is very similar. There's two differences. So one, it actually will align itself horizontally first. So it will try to match the same X position of the fox, and then once it has the same X position, it will move up or down to try and hit the fox from above or below. So that's the first difference. The second difference is the skull moves on every other turn. So this probably isn't the best way to do it, but it was the way that I thought of doing it. Um, it updates a special variable called skull movement, and you can see all your variables in the settings here, skull movement. And I basically wait to see for this number to go up. I believe it's above or greater to 1. Let me check. Oh no, it's great. It's greater than a certain threshold. So because I can have X number of skulls on the map, and also bats. Bats move under the same logic. So it's not just skull movement, but also the bat movements are tied to the same variable. Obviously, I added the bats later, otherwise, I would have named this a better variable. So what I had to do is, because this would run for every skull or bat exists on the scene, I first count the actors of all of them, and then basically perform some math in a way such that the sum of all of the numbers that get added for all the actors will equal about 1. So the skull movement will equal approximately 1, and it equals approximately 1 because JavaScript math is very funny. Um, and because it'll be about 1, it won't hit this comparison threshold, so it won't perform a movement yet. But when it reaches that threshold, then it sets the movement back down to 0. And when it's 0, that indicates the skulls and the bats that it can move. And then it can run all of this logic because it's behind this branch here, waiting for that skull movement value to equal 0. That's really the whole game. It's a lot of signals and nonsense. um, it was mostly just to see if I could do it. You would not. This is not how you would use Whimtale engine. You would just have like your own hero walking out um, in the scenes, interacting with things itself. But I want to see if I could do like a layer of indirection, like I did with this game. So that's all.